Hi everyone. We're not Robert Maya's here. Now I know we're time to start. My name is Barry Ira Geller, and this is Mike Medavoy. Just joking. Mike Royer, and we both had the extreme experience in working with Jack Kirby. In around 1978, I purchased the rights to Roger Zelazny's Lord of Light because I felt that this book showed the future. It showed where people were going to go, the gods, but they were gods who, like us, except that they had some advanced technologies that allowed them to change their bodies like we change clothes, essentially. But they were just as crazy and screwed up as our modern civilization. They blew up their planet and had to emigrate, find a new one. And they came to a place called Earth, that they named Earth after their own planet, Earth. Spelled with a U-R-T-H, but they came in a ship called the Star of India, and they brought with them this culture from the original Earth, which is this Earth. And so we have that special twist going on with flash forwards and flashbacks, which always made Roger's book, and at times, very hard to read sometimes, and very hard for producers to especially read when I was pushing the book in the 70s and 80s. Mike is sort of like my Rain Man, if one's familiar with the film. I would work with Jack. Next, you want to do that? Good. No, one at a time. And I would spend hours with him discussing, well, pretty much anything. But we select an aspect of my screenplay, and I was crazy enough to say, let's build a theme park based on the sets of Lord of Light. So Jack was really tasked by me to come up with next.
Next slide. You.
Next.
You. Next slide. Just moving it out of the way so you can see your face, because we want the face of a shot.
Sorry.
I'll make it work.
Yeah, here you go. That all right?
Is that the slide you want?
Yeah, that's fine. So I tasked him really with being an architect. I knew Jack when I was a teenager, early years, where I picked up a Fantastic Four off a newsstand in the Bronx, and I'd open it up, and there's that montage of that spaceship and Galactus and everything, and my brains were completely ruined at that point forward. And I literally left school and freeloaded colleges, and because something had changed within me. And so I would talk to Jack for a little while about themes that were in my screenplay, and then I'd leave, and I'd come back a few days later, not a few hours, and they'd all be done. So I literally didn't meet this man until a few years ago, when I found out that he's the guy. He knew that he had heard about me because he cashed my checks. and so but the concept of that I thought I'd talk about today was not just, hey, I worked with Jack Kirby, but what is it that made that guy, I mean, right now, what is it that made that guy change the world? We know we changed the world. I'm saying he saved the world. The original idea of Lord of Light was these gods, and for me to turn people into gods. And Jack went, sounds good to me. So Mike Breuer added, on my website, there's a talk of how he worked with Jack's pencils. He didn't do a Mike Breuer, if I'm paraphrasing you correctly. He found out what Jack really wanted. Is that what you said?
Well, when I worked with Jack Kirby, when I worked with Jack, I would get his pencils, and I totally submerged any personality that I thought I should use to maybe embellish them. What I did was finished his statement. And I remember the day he called and he said, I've got a project I want you to ink and letter. He said, but it's not for Marvel or DC. And I really enjoyed it, working on all of his architectural drawings and his gods, because I had time to really have fun and really finish his pencil statement in ink. And it was so amazing. But Jack wasn't purposely closed-lipped. He just didn't say anything more than, I've got this project for you, and it's not Marvel and DC. And so it was years before I realized what eventually happened with that artwork, and your foresight into what it should all be.
To me, it was, I think that was the big agreement on that. Jack has a good point. I at the time, was full of different science ideas and plans, and like I worked in television, but I really felt that nothing was really happening like I really wanted it to. Star Wars had just come out. I was one of those guys, those crazy people spending hours on that first line. And like, I wanted to, Jack to me represented that if you go down a dark passageway at night and you run into this guy who will then secret you into some other room where the real thing was happening, that was him. And I found him. And like, so we went on an adventure together, and he went, to me, I thought this was just the natural thing to do. Like, well, of course, Jack Kirby is the only body to do this. And when I spoke with, showed Jack's work to Ray Bradbury and to John Chambers, which we're gonna, the vision that he had was everyone agreed with. Somehow, when I was like 30, 31 or something, I just was so tuned into what I call Jack Kirby's consciousness, of which then I named this panel, and because I saw that what he was doing was plugged into the universe, really. I hadn't seen much of, unlike a lot of the major guys in the comic book field, like yourself, I was out there. I just had the same vision that I saw in Jack, I saw in Ray Bradbury, I saw in Bucky Fuller, John Chambers, and Paolo Soleri. And I wanted to build these huge buildings that were holograms with a guy named Don Broadbent, and everyone was, they were like my old home school friends. But Jack was the center core of that. And the chance to work with him, I never even thought about it. It was, how can we affect the world? How can we really make people better? How can we change the imagination of children? That, in fact, was my stated mission, purpose, statement, whatever. and everyone was totally there. And so it's like Jack, and you, if without you, it wouldn't have been possible, because you were interpreting Jack to Jack. I didn't know this until much later, how important an inker was to a pencilist like Jack, and you were there. I mean, he trusted everything to you. He laughs. You know.
Well, trust is the theme of the introduction I wrote to the IDW and the Kirby Museum's book on pencil to ink. But Jack Kirby, and everything that he did in his entire career, was channeled through every one of his life experiences.
Right.
Where he grew up, fighting in the streets, wanting to get away from the slums, wanting to do something and to be creative. And in later years, this is a guy who fought in the trenches in Europe and saw his friends die in front of him. All these experiences in his life were always channeled through everything he did. And I think it made him the perfect person to then think about how to shape the future based on everything that he'd experienced in his life.
At the point that I brought him Lord of Light and the screenplay, we were talking about changing people's lives. What's wrong with the world? I mean, he was more pissed off about one of the space probes that had had a bunch of stuff about the Americans and the human race. And I went, why? He said, because it shows them where to find us. That's where. I mean, it wasn't like that president this or this congressman that. No, that's what he was at. And it's interesting. Over the years, I've become acquainted with, on various higher levels, something called Kabbalah, which deals with the creation of life, or the expression of God through 10 aspects of existence, and it's something that the Hebrew culture barely talks about. But right at the top of that, or just before the top, you have archetypes. In other words, the imagination, the seeds of imagination. And this man lived right there. I was wondering, how the hell, okay, we can do the next one, how did we cross over? Keep in mind now, we have a comics artist, albeit the best, but still, his work affected in the so-called reality that was used by the CIA, and no one knew about it until like 2000, who created this. You can do another one. Go ahead. Yeah, stop there. Who like, unbeknownst to us, my makeup man, John Chambers, who Planet of the Apes Oscar, he was the Mission Impossible makeup guy for the CIA. And no one knew it. I mean, we're in a production meeting once, and I'm not sure if Jack was there, but we were talking about Brando being one of the chief gods, and John said, don't worry, I've invented some stuff that would make Brando a lot younger looking. And he said, I've do that in the CIA. And the three or four of us looked at him and go, yeah, John, sure. And then the fact is, he really did do that. And for Jack's work, I mean, think of all the consequences. I mean, the connections, the possibilities, the billion, trillion to one circumstances of all the moments of my life that met him, met you right now, and all of our lives meeting each other. That moment where John, I managed, when I got John to come into the production, I was driving home going, yeah, got fucking John Chambers. Anyway, but all of this was together and unified. And Jack was, when I say Jack Kirby's consciousness, I mean all of our consciousnesses, but Jack had a germ or a seed from the highest creativity in life, as far as I'm concerned. In other words, I asked myself, how the hell did that happen? How did the CIA get involved in all this? I mean, the film is only half there. The actual breakdown, or when they sent everybody back, was like about a month before, not at the last second. And they were ready to give up. And then John saw that I was running into a few problems building a science fiction land in Colorado. So he handed the script and designs over to Mendez, who then took, well, you see one on the left, Lord of Light, and then the one on the right, he took my name off, took Lord of Light off, and he just made ARGO. And that's what he handed out to the Iranians. He just took our names off. Go ahead. Okay.
There has been a dramatic development concerning other Americans in Iran, who probably would also be hostages today, except for...
When the embassy was overrun, we were immediately on a wartime footing. Along comes a memorandum from the State Department saying, by the way, 6 of our people escaped, and they're in the care of the Canadians. Could you please think about how you might get them out too? So now we got a problem. How are we going to get them out ahead of hostile pursuit?
The Iranians don't know they're there.
But they will rather soon. My biggest problem, creating a deception that everybody could believe in. A Hollywood location scouting party. We stole the script from The Lord of Light. It was a defunct production. Mythology, sci-fi, and mystical things. If you read the script, it is very hard to follow. It is very convoluted. My guys went in, set up the production offices on the old Columbia Studio lot in Hollywood. This is a Friday. By Tuesday, 4 days later, we were up and running.
You're posing as a Hollywood producer making a fictitious script, Lord of Light.
Yes. The telephone that somebody's going to answer, oh yeah, they're out there scouting a location. And then we made this portfolio that had everything in it that I would carry along with me, and that's the window dressing. Say, okay, that's you, and that you're the location manager, you're transportation coordinator, the set designer, and they all just loved it. You know, everybody wants to be from Hollywood. And we arrived on the 25th of January. We went in and marched them out 3 days later.
What happens at the end of Lord of Light?
I have no idea. I didn't have time to read it.
Next, yeah. And I just want to show you this photo that I found. It was amazing. There's a museum in the CIA building somewhere, and there's our drawings that Jack and I designed. And there's a script that says ARGO, but it's actually was the adaptation for Lord of Light, I think. And anyway, Mike just made a very interesting point, and that was, it wouldn't have happened without Jack's drawings. And it wouldn't have happened unless I had called up Jack. Now that doesn't single me out, or you out, or any of us.
But it's this overall consciousness. You went to Jack because you were impressed by the work you saw he was doing in comic books.
And he changed my life.
And none of this would have happened. This whole conscience, you and Jack and the CIA seeing the artwork, if this hadn't existed, who knows how history would have unfolded.
Exactly. And that's my point about how Jack Kirby saved the world. the continuity of life, the sequences in life, at my age, Jesus, I'm 70, call the unity of life, is that everything is connected. And we just don't know it because we're looking at what's in front of us, the next thing that's in front of us, and the next. But it goes sideways as well. And Jack Kirby was tuned into these archetypes to such a degree that somehow he expressed this no thing that the Hebrews call God, but it's the same name, the same entity, the same intelligence, no matter what you call it, him or her. It's the same. It's who we are. And he somehow plugged in. So few people in history are able to do that. Christ, Buddha, Moses. They plug in and life changes around them. And now I'm not saying to make Jack a saint, because he's already Saint Jack. But this is the value. Okay, wait, next one. Yeah, good. Stop there. And the people that I went to, like this man, here's John Chambers. I actually had interviewed him in the early 70s and put on his, anyone ever see The Island of Dr. Moreau? Yeah. Great film. And like I have a picture of me somewhere trying on one of those masks, which Bill Tuttle took credit for because he was the president at that time, the head of the makeup department. But it was like I was transported. And that's, this whole culture is about masks. That when someone puts on a mask or whatever, and that's the source of Halloween in a lot of ways, they transform their consciousness. You've had that experienced a million times, I'm sure, from the things that you've drawn and inked. And in a lot of ways, I see Jack's, all his comics, the best ones, all of them really, because it's usually the executives who would say, that's not good enough, Jack.
Jack's consciousness, I a couple of years after telling Jack I wanted to stretch my wings, I wound up at Disney. And I think some of the most creative and finest work I ever did, believe it or not, was with mice and ducks and tigers and Pooh Bears. But everything that I drew at Disney, in my mind, Jack is looking over my shoulder and he's saying, do it your way, make it your way, nobody else's. And it's just part of this consciousness. If I hadn't worked with Jack and listened to him and talked to him as he talked about life and the future and the past and how it was all connected, I don't think I would have had the career I had at Disney if it hadn't been for Jack.
Many of us, by the way, not to get into any horse at all, the horseless horse, or the horseless high horse, but we all share those experiences in our lives. We met somebody, or we had an idea, maybe it didn't germinate right away, but we changed. And the difference between working with Jack Kirby that I experienced and himself, was that he was on such an accelerated rate of change. It's like a bumblebee that's supposed to be aeronautically impossible, right? But his buzz encompassed. There's untold number of stories of how many books, his productivity, all that no one can figure out. But what it is that his consciousness was clearly connected to a very high source of creativity and creation, which all our religions on this planet are really about. And that's why he said to me, if he hadn't been invited to do Lord of Light, he would have called me up, but of course, I did call him up. So the way that Mike, amazingly, you see, each one of those drawings is an architectural piece never thought of before. And I didn't know myself at the time. I'm just thinking of, hey, I go to Century City in LA, and I look around those giant buildings, and I go, oh yeah, Chambers of Brahma, oh yeah, northeast corner of heaven. And I would see these block-long buildings, and I would imagine science fiction land. And then I go to Jack, and I go, oh, what do you think of this? And he'd go, of course. He'd say, of course. And it'd come back in a few days. And I believe it hasn't stopped. I sort of took a vacation for 30 years being what was I doing? A software developer. And I got really great at it, did a few patents, but I somehow, and this is what's interesting, I've returned to this. I'm basically starting off where I left nearly 40 years ago. It's like the power of working with Mr. Kirby, with Mr. Jack Kirby, and with Mike Royer it wouldn't let me just fade off into that whatever of the poet. It's my greatest pleasure to bring this back again, because it doesn't stop. It's not going to stop. Next one. And yeah, stop there. That one you see there is called the Terminal of the Gods. Under look out, Disneyland Science City is coming. I was interviewed, again, I'm talking about the same theme. I was interviewed a few years ago by the sons of the Iranian revolutionaries. These are now their big artists and this, that. And they were describing how Persia was used by Hollywood. And at the end of the interview, I asked the guy, and this is by Skype, the internet's great, thank you. I said, well, what was your favorite drawing? And the guy said, Terminal of the Gods, which was the first one that we did. I don't know if you can see that. It's sort of that Mayan feeling to it. Can everyone sort of, more than that. But he had just done the Eternals, of which I managed to bring my son over for breakfast one time, and my son went, sign Jack Kirby. And he signed him, but the idea was on multifold. And this was the beginning of the bullet train that I was negotiating with Japan. So we talk a lot about, how the drawings influenced the Iranians and getting the 6 Americans out. But what we were doing is that I had a deal going with the big Japanese company who did the bullet train in Japan, of course, and I wanted to build one across, from different parts of Colorado, and magnetic levitation. At that time, it was 40 years ago, maglev. And they go, well, you can't do that, you're going to run into stuff. Well, there's these new autonomous cars, but that's what I was doing, and my point was, I'm only going to go 2 miles. I don't have to figure the whole thing out. And so this was the structure, and he sort of put this dome over that, because I was putting a dome over the entire theme park, Bucky Fuller's dome. I think it was 1/3 a mile high and 2/3 of a mile in diameter, and like so he added that, and so that represented you're entering science fiction land. And the Iranians thought so highly of that. I go, why? It's because it meant to them the leaving of the Shah and the return of their religion. And I went, what? Because Americans, no one in America, not even the CIA, realized that that drawing that they showed everybody was having that effect. And forget about what you saw in Mr. Affleck's film. Just forget it. It's like they were looking at these drawings, and that one in specifically, in particularly, I'm sorry, and they went going, oh, I got it. And that's what I was told this. That's what made them believe that the CIA was a real film company. Again, consciousness of Jack Kirby, the connectivity of things. How the hell did that one man create that based on a conversation? I had no idea. I said, I wanted to have this. We're going to have trains coming in. We're going to have like gods, some depiction of the gods. And he turned this up about a few days later, and I went, I like it. And I'm going to reveal something today, is that I'm negotiating with a company in China, and they're going to be there's a new technology out. They can take each one of those figures and turn them into 10-inch models. And the first time anyone has ever done that. So that's a continuation. Are we able to?
It's at the end of the thing.
Oh, okay, at the end of it I'll show it to you. But I realized that our purpose is this a continuation of everything that we did together. That in one way had nothing to do with the comics business, and it had everything to do with it, because it showed in our current lifetime that a lot of this is all connected and possible. Let's go forward. This is the northeast corner of heaven. I just basically had a lot of ideas here. I'll give a briefly, we have time, I hope. To me, I was sort of reverse engineering. If I'm here on the planet and I have, this is like my existing technology, I went to look at a lot of the stuff Jack and I went over, but you saw that book, The Art of India, that big giant book. Did he ever give you?
I never looked at it, but I think I remember seeing it.
Right.
He was in, well.
Go ahead.
Just back to my thought that Jack channeled everything that he lived and experienced into his work. I firmly believe that with him channeling every life experience, everything he read, saw, had done in his life, gave Jack the ability to then extrapolate and go into the future.
I like that. Because his work is here now, and it's changing people right now. It's altering the future we live in the present that we live in is pretty much the future that we created all these stuff in. And they're becoming very real. In fact, they are. That one there was based on a bunch of the pyramids in India, and I just said, well, what would they look like new? And the Tibetans have a particular philosophy where the top part of theirs, what they call a stupa, is the higher consciousness, where someone through many years of meditation will reach a certain kind of level of existence and consciousness. So we just reversed it all, and and that's how we drew it. This, okay. The first one I wanted to have a building dedicated to Brahma, the chief god. And Jack did that, and I went, well, it was more, I wanted something, again, that was a film set, as well as a theme park set. And so I said, too much. Well, it was like an explosion, again, of if you leave Jack alone. And I think I had it was a strange wire that I walked, because I'm putting a lot of money into the vision that comes out and designing it with him, but you can't tell someone like Jack Kirby what to do, I mean, I think some people try to their detriment. So we met each other sort of like that, as a connection, and so I had him, because this I called it, in the end, the consciousness of Brahma. That's really what he did. He said, well, what is that Brahma? How does it work? What's his mindset? And Jack it shows that he was in that future, that he didn't have to really, he never read the book Lord of Light. He didn't have to. He was already, in a different galactic system. And next, okay, that is what I wanted, which had a cantilevered gardens and all the 8 heads of Brahma moving around, and this great searchlight lotus thing, and these people down there. When you saw that, what was your feeling?
Well, Jack, like I said, was close-lipped on a lot of times. He just sent me the work. And I just looked at it, and it literally blew my mind. It's like, I don't know what this is, but it was the feeling that I can't wait to get started, and this is so fascinating. Don't screw it up. And it was really, it and his gods drawings were probably the best inking I ever did on Jack Kirby, in my opinion.
Wow.
Because I had time to really not unconsciously finish his stuff, but consciously think about what he meant. And so when I inked it, that the weight of the line and so on would give it a form that was in Jack's head when he drew it. And it was a very interesting time, and as you pointed out, it was years before I knew what ultimately became of this. And I don't want to use bad language. Are people offended by 4-letter words? No. There's a Western cowboy-themed bar in Jacksonville, Oregon, 11 miles from where I live. And a couple of years ago, I walked in, and Sue, the gal that owns the place, said, "Have you seen ARGO?" And I said, "No, but I have a connection." She says, "What do you mean a connection?" I says, "Well, I inked and lettered the original art that Jack Kirby drew that ultimately was used to get the hostages out of Iran." And she said, "ARGO, fuck yourself."
Which, in fact, Mendez, the spy, that's how they named ARGO. It was a slang in the CIA for ARGO, fuck yourself. And that's documented. Can we go forward again, to go back to the previous one? Sorry. Back there. Now let's look at that again in light of what I've been saying about consciousness and about this. The head of Sotheby's he wanted me to give that to him, and I go, "Are you out of your mind?" But that was his favorite one, and to me, I better look at it this way. This is everything happening at once. I've one time spent an hour or more just sort of looking at what the hell is going on in this thing, and it's one of my most favorite things, although I didn't use it, but it shows again that nature of a person seeing stuff like this, and that effect, how in tune he was to our current lifetime, even all these years later, and will continue for a couple more years, as in a few hundred. I sincerely believe that, because when I say he saved the world, next, good, I really mean that he has created a new world for us to live in. And you know, it may sound big words, but who else has? When you think about it. This, to me, I asked for Brahma, the internal. And each one of those slats there, people come out to take a meeting with God. And they come right out on like a diving pole. And his throne, I called a Naga throne. I had a little bit more input on this than on some others. Jack and I sort of were some 70 him, some 70 me. And Braz said, and you know, Jack's doing this snake thing, and he goes, Braz says, well, he's just into snakes. But this is that power of this guy, and like like a few hundred feet down, in each one of these drawings, where is the viewpoint? I mean, normally we have a perspective, but where is his viewpoint? Is it some bird flying a mile away? Is it... Next, please.
Well, it's funny. I look at these drawings of Jack, and that question has never crossed my mind, because what is there is so powerful.
Yes, exactly.
That I feel that maybe it's not important to know what the viewpoint is. It's our viewpoint, what we internally interpret from looking at that, and it has such power and magic and wonder. So basically, or realistically, it's from our viewpoint.
God, you're a genius. That is a very, that's, I mean, I've had a lot of people tell me different answers, and that's the best I've ever heard, because it, in fact, really is. It opens, what is Jack Kirby's consciousness? That he opens our awareness, that it opens our consciousness. When we open up a comic book of his, we're in a new world. It's like into a 3D, 4D, 5D world, but it's through that 2D plane. It opens up our consciousness, and I really like that answer. Here, go down. Yeah, next one. I wanted to have something of Sam Mahasamatman, and I sort of described him to Jack, and the Lord of Light has him wearing this great, in the novel itself, this magnetic belt. Here I am holding my chest, and hands are below the table line so everyone can see me. But like that belt in the center and that eye of Agamotto that I used to describe to him, that made Sam his power, who then played Buddha and Mahasamatman and like fought the gods to return freedom back to the passengers, which by that time had become mankind. 1,000 years, not much. You know, married to Kali for maybe 900 years. Imagine that. So, for those of us who are married or have been,
900 years.
yes. You know, Zelazny. Well, maybe that had something to do with her trying to assassinate him several times. But they were still in love, which their love scene in the book is what attracted me to when I ran into this to buy the book. It's an amazing love scene where Sam, they meet again after she captured him, and they're in some party and they come back together, and she says she's trying to convince him to become her warrior again, because she rode with him to fight all the other creatures. And she says, well, you think we should make love? And like old times? And he says, and seal my doom? Of course. But we were very late starting. Anyway, okay, continue. There's another viewpoint one, but we got about 5 minutes?
No, we're down to the nut. You
2 minutes?
wrap it up.
Okay, so come to the end. More. Now that's what I gave Jack to the blueprint of which he turned into the Science Fiction Land theme park. And I'll keep going.
Oh, I think we did that.
These are models that are being done, and let's see, towards the end, here. And now that. These are the models that are being done right now of that. Go forward again. No, forward, back, I'm sorry.
Backwards.
This is there, the guy at the right. Yes.
Yeah.
So, finally, okay, we have to stop right now, but last thing I'm going to say is that Gail Ann Hurd, who did Terminator, all the series, and Walking Dead on television, has optioned Lord of Light, and they're just maybe going into production within the next 6 months. And so we'll see Lord of Light as a 4 or 5 year series. Thank you. Now, why not?